I never meant those words the way they sounded. You'll never find someone like me. Honestly, I wasn't even sure she heard me that day. She didn't turn, didn't flinch, didn't give me the satisfaction of knowing whether I'd crossed some invisible line. But now, looking back, I think that was the moment everything started, long before I understood what everything even meant. The afternoon she walked into the small repair shop felt like any other. The humming of old ceiling fans, the metallic clink of tools, the faint smell of oil that never quite left my clothes no matter how many times I washed them. I was tightening the bolts on a battered generator when the bell above the door gave its tired ring. She stepped inside like she already knew the place, though I'd never seen her before. Confident posture, steady steps, a worn leather bag over her shoulder. She looked like someone who had lived enough life to stop apologizing for walking into a room. Mid-40s, maybe older, but it wasn't the age I noticed first. It was the way the room suddenly felt too small for both of us. "Is anyone here good with old things?" she asked, holding up a vintage radio, the kind my grandfather used to swear by. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried, smooth, low, a little amused. I straightened fast, banging my knee against the metal frame. Yes. I am. Good with old things. God, why did I say it like that? One eyebrow lifted. Not judgmental, more like she was trying not to smile. She placed the radio on my workbench with a careful precision, like it mattered. It was scratched and dented, the knobs faded. She rested her fingertips on it for a second longer than necessary before letting go. "It belonged to someone important," she said. "I'd like to hear it working again." I nodded, pretending I knew what I was doing as I inspected it. My hands always shook a little when I pretended too hard. You can wait here if you want." She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she walked around the shop, her eyes scanning shelves of dusty tools and half-finished projects. Not judging, more like she was quietly cataloging the place, finding the rhythm of it. Then she stopped behind me. Not close, but close enough that I felt the warmth of her presence at my back. "You're younger than I expected," she said softly. "Is that a problem?" "No, a beat. Just an observation." The static-filled silence between us felt louder than the radio I was trying to fix. I kept working because it gave my hands something to do. She kept watching, though I only saw her in the reflection of the small steel panel on the bench. Arms crossed, one foot angled slightly outward, head tilted, as if she was listening not just to the radio, but to me. Or maybe she was listening for something I didn't realize I was giving away. At one point, my screwdriver slipped. She reached out, instinctively, I guess, and steadied the radio with her hand at the same moment my fingers brushed the edge. We both froze. Her hand was warm. Mine wasn't. She pulled back first, slow, composed. I did the opposite, too quick, too obvious. "Sorry," I muttered. "For what?" she asked. And there was something in the way she said it, curious, almost gentle, that made my chest tighten. Like she knew I wasn't really apologizing for the touch. Like she knew I was apologizing for something unspoken. Minutes later, the radio crackled to life. She exhaled, quiet, relieved, maybe even grateful. "You did more than fix it," she murmured. I didn't know what she meant. Maybe I still don't. But as she reached for the radio, our eyes met for half a second too long, neither of us looking away first. And that was the moment that stuck with me. The moment I still can't stop thinking about. I wasn't expecting to see her again so soon. 2 days after the radio, I was sweeping metal shavings off the floor when her shadow stretched across the doorway. Long, steady, unmistakably hers. She didn't step inside right away. She lingered at the threshold, fingers resting on the edge of the doorframe, like she was measuring her reasons for being here. "I think it's still not working right," she said, holding the radio in the crook of her arm. "Or maybe I'm doing something wrong." Her tone was different this time, lighter, but also thinner, like she'd been carrying something heavier than the radio. I nodded and motioned her in. "I can take another look." She placed the radio on my workbench, but her hands stayed there a moment, palms flat against the metal surface. Her shoulders looked tense, tighter than they were last time. Maybe she hadn't slept much. Maybe she was thinking too loudly. "Rough day?" I asked before I could stop myself. She gave a quiet laugh, short, small, not really a laugh at all. You could say that. She didn't elaborate, and I didn't push. I just started working on the radio again, pretending I wasn't watching her reflection in the shiny aluminum casing. She stood with her arms loosely folded, gaze drifting across the shop, but her breathing gave her away, slower each minute, like she was trying to steady herself. She caught me looking once. "What?" she asked, but not sharply. More like she genuinely wanted to know. "Your hands," I said before thinking. They looked tired. Her eyes softened in a way I hadn't seen before. She glanced down at her own fingers, flexing them slightly, as if noticing the ache only now. "I've been writing contracts all morning," she murmured. "Too many deadlines. Too many people expecting too much." She didn't sound annoyed, just worn down. And for the first time, I saw something break through the confident exterior she carried. A small crack, a breath's hesitation, the quiet admission that she didn't have everything together. I cleared my throat and bent closer to the radio. "You don't have to stay if you're busy." "I'm fine," she said quickly, too quickly. Then she softened, looking away. "I just didn't want to go home yet." Her voice dipped on that last word. Home. It hung in the air like something she was trying not to touch. I pretended to adjust a wire so I wouldn't stare. "You can stay as long as you want." She moved closer, leaning slightly over my shoulder to see what I was doing. I caught the faint scent of her perfume. Subtle, something floral, but not sweet. It made the shop feel warmer than it was. A minute later, the radio crackled again, clearer this time. She let out a slow exhale, almost relieved. "You have steady hands," she said quietly. I didn't. Not around her. She reached out, not to touch me, but to touch the radio, and her fingers hovered near mine, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating. She didn't pull away this time. And for one suspended moment, her leaning closer, me trying not to breathe too loudly, the world shrank to the tiny space between our hands. She finally whispered, barely audible, "Thank you. I needed this." But I wasn't sure if she meant the radio at all. It was the rain that kept her there longer than either of us intended. I was closing up the shop, flipping light switches and stacking tools, when she appeared again, an outline behind the fogged glass door, shaking water from her hair. The storm outside was the kind that swallowed sound, heavy drops slamming against the roof like they were trying to break through. "I didn't realize it would get this bad," she said, stepping inside. Her coat dripped onto the dusty floor. "Do you mind if I wait here? Just until it settles." "Yeah, sure. Of course." Too eager. Too quick. I pretended to rearrange the toolbox to hide it. She moved to the small table near the window, just an old desk covered in forgotten invoices, and sat down, rubbing her palms together for warmth. Her hair, usually so controlled, clung to her cheeks. For the first time, she looked humanly undone. Not dramatic, just tired in a way she didn't try to hide this time. I made tea, bad tea, the shop kind, and placed the cup in front of her. She held it between her hands, letting the steam rise into her face. "Thank you," she murmured, her voice quieter than usual. "You don't have to take care of me." "I'm not," I said. "It's just tea." She gave a soft, knowing smile. "It's not the tea." The room fell quiet, except for the rhythmic storm outside. She looked at me like she wanted to say something, like she was deciding whether tonight was the night she gave away a piece of herself she'd kept guarded. Her phone buzzed. She jolted slightly, and that alone told me too much. The caller ID lit up. "Daniel." She turned the screen face down on the table, jaw tightening for barely a second. "You can answer it," I said, even though something in me hoped she wouldn't. "It's nothing," she said, but the way her fingers tapped the table, not nervous, more irritated, suggested otherwise. I sat across from her, watching the rain smear the outside world into blurry streaks. The storm made the room feel smaller, pushing us closer without either of us moving. She finally spoke, eyes on her hands. "Do you ever feel like you're always holding everything together for everyone else, until you walk into one quiet room and realize you don't have the strength for it anymore?" Her voice didn't crack. She was too controlled for that. But something in the question itself felt like a confession. I swallowed. "Yeah, more than I should." She looked up sharply, almost surprised I understood, even a little. Another phone buzz. This time she silenced it without even checking. Sorry, she muttered. I shouldn't be bringing things here. You're not, I said. The words came out softer than I intended. She blinked, and for a moment neither of us looked away. Her hand rested on the table, fingers loosely curled around the warm cup. Mine slid forward, not to touch, just close enough that if either of us breathed the wrong way, the gap would disappear. For a second, just a second, it felt like we were leaning in, mirroring each other's breath, the storm pressing us together. Then headlights flashed across the window, someone pulling into the parking lot. She inhaled sharply, pulled back, and straightened her coat like she'd just remembered something important she had no choice but to return to. I should go, she whispered, standing too fast. Wait, I started. But she was already walking toward the door, pausing with her hand on the handle. She didn't look back when she said it, but her voice carried something fragile. Don't make this harder. She opened the door, stopped, and for half a heartbeat, she almost turned around. Almost. She came back the next evening. Not for the radio, not for the weather. Just stood outside the shop long enough for me to wonder if she'd turn around again like last time. She didn't. She stepped inside without a word, closed the door behind her, and leaned against it like she needed something solid to keep herself from unraveling. I didn't move from the workbench. I wasn't sure I should. You left in a hurry yesterday, I said quietly. She brushed a damp strand of hair behind her ear. Not raining this time. Just misty, the kind that clings to the skin. I know. Silence stretched. Not uncomfortable. Just full, like the space between us had its own breathing pattern. I wiped my hands on a rag, even though they were already clean. You almost said something. So did you. Her voice wasn't sharp. If anything, it was too calm, like she'd spent all night rehearsing a version of herself that could walk in here without shaking. She moved a few steps closer, then stopped when the floor creaked, like the sound itself startled her. I don't know what we're doing, she said, finally meeting my eyes. And I don't know why I keep coming back here when I tell myself I shouldn't. I exhaled slowly. You're not bothering me. That's exactly the problem, she whispered. Her gaze didn't drop this time. It stayed locked on mine, steady, searching for something neither of us could name. I felt the weight of every unfinished conversation between us, every almost touch, every glance that lasted a second too long. My chest tightened, not in a romantic way, but in the way truth corners you when you've run out of polite lies. She walked past me, trailing her fingers lightly across a shelf of dusty screws and spare wires. I haven't been honest, she said. Not with myself. Not with you. Her fingers paused on an old wrench, gripping it like she needed something to hold. I keep thinking I can manage everything, that I can keep people at the right distance. But then I come here, and she didn't finish. The wrench dropped with a soft metallic clink. I stepped closer, not enough to touch, just enough that she felt the heat of my presence behind her. What do you want me to do? I asked. Tell me, and I'll do it. She let out a brittle breath, somewhere between a laugh and a sigh. You shouldn't ask me that. I might actually answer. I swallowed. Hard. She turned around slowly, her eyes tracing my face in quiet, deliberate movements, like she was memorizing the parts she knew she wasn't supposed to look at for too long. I'm not young, she said. I don't get to be reckless. I don't get to make mistakes that cost me something. And I'm supposed to pretend this is nothing? I said, voice lower than I intended. Her jaw tightened. Her chest rose and fell once. Deep, steady, like she was bracing for impact. No, she whispered. Pretending isn't working either. We stood inches apart. Neither of us moved. The silence between us grew sharper, more fragile. Like if one of us spoke too loudly, everything would crack open. She lifted her hand, halfway, hesitant, then let it fall before it reached me. I can't do this, she said. I nodded, even though my throat burned. Yeah, I know. But she didn't leave. She just stared at me, eyes glossy but steady, and said the one line that hit harder than anything she'd said before. I'm afraid you see me too clearly, and I don't know how to hide from that. I found out by accident. Not through a confession. Not through some dramatic confrontation. Just life slipping out of her hands for one unguarded second. She'd stopped by the shop again, this time carrying nothing. No radio, no excuse. She just walked in, placed her bag on the nearest stool, and said, "I don't want to talk about yesterday." Which, of course, meant she couldn't stop thinking about yesterday. I made us both tea. She didn't touch hers. She just wrapped her hands around the warm cup like it was something alive. Her phone buzzed once, face down on the table. She ignored it. Buzzed again. Her shoulders tensed. Then again. She flinched. Finally, with a frustrated exhale, she grabbed the phone and stood up like she intended to step outside. But instead, she just froze. The voicemail screen was open, must have pocket dialed. And before she could stop it, before she could hide the evidence, the first seconds of an old recording played. A man's voice, older, rough around the edges. "You can't keep running. You promised you'd try. Please, don't shut me out again." She fumbled with the phone, hands tremoring in a way I'd never seen from her. "It's nothing," she snapped, but her voice cracked, barely. She locked the screen, shoved the phone deep into her bag, and pressed her palms into her eyes like she could push the moment out of existence. I didn't speak right away. The quiet was too heavy, too raw. "Who was that?" I finally asked, gently. She didn't answer. She just folded her arms tightly across her chest, staring at the floorboards as if she expected them to open and swallow her. "He sounds like someone who still cares," I said. "That's the problem." Soft, barely audible, a truth she wished she could swallow back. She walked to the corner of the shop, pacing a slow line, arms wrapped around herself. "He wasn't," she stopped. "Tried again. He used to be good. Before everything got complicated." I didn't push. I gave her the silence she clearly needed to fill. She let out a long, unsteady breath. "You remind me of him. Not who he became. Who he was before I broke everything." Her words hit something deep, surprise, confusion, a little spark of something I didn't want to name yet. "I'm not him," I said quietly. "I know," she replied. "That's why it scares me." She leaned her back against the wall, sliding down until she sat on the floor. Her eyes weren't glossy. She didn't cry. She just looked tired, the kind of tired that settles in the bones. I sat across from her, a few feet away. Our knees almost touched. She picked at the hem of her sleeve, staring at it like it held answers. "He left a long time ago," she whispered. "But the part of me that believed I could love someone without ruining it, that's what never came back." "That's not fair to you," I said. "That's life," she murmured, giving a sad half-shrug. The shop felt too quiet. The rain from earlier had dried, leaving only the faint hum of passing cars. Then she looked up at me, slow, deliberate, and said something that shifted the ground under both of us. "I didn't come here for the radio, or the rain, or to avoid him." A pause. Deep breath. Voice barely steady. "I came because being near you doesn't hurt. And I don't remember the last time I felt that." I didn't say anything at first. Her confession, that being near me didn't hurt, hung in the air like a fragile thread, something that might snap if I pulled too hard or moved too quickly. She stayed sitting on the floor, back against the wall, arms wrapped around herself like she wasn't sure what part of her was allowed to unfold. I lowered myself to the floor beside her, slow enough that she could have stopped me. She didn't. The distance between us felt different now. Not charged, not forbidden. Just real. Two people who had run out of ways to pretend they weren't orbiting each other. "I don't want to be a reminder," I said softly. She shook her head. "You're not. You're something else." I waited. She didn't clarify, and I didn't ask. Some things aren't meant to be named right away. Her breathing steadied, but her shoulders stayed tense, like she wasn't sure whether to let go or hold herself together. "You think you ruin things," I murmured. "But you don't. Not here." She let out a shaky laugh, pressing a hand to her forehead. "You don't even know me. I know the way you hesitate before answering your phone." I paused. "And the way you stand at the door like you're deciding if you deserve to be here." Her eyes flicked to mine, stunned, soft, undeniably seen. "And I know," I added, "you don't come here for the things you say you do." She looked down at her hands. "I don't know how to do this without hurting someone. Maybe you. Maybe myself." "Then we don't do anything," I said. "Not until it feels like we can." Her lip trembled, not dramatically, just enough that she bit it to steady herself. "No one's ever offered me that before." She turned her face toward me. Not closer, just open, for once. Vulnerability without the armor. You make it easy to breathe, she whispered. I don't understand it, and I don't trust it. I don't want you to trust it yet, I said. Just sit with me. Her shoulders loosened, not fully, but enough that something inside her gave way. She let her head fall lightly against the wall, closing her eyes as if the honesty exhausted her. I didn't touch her, not at first, but after a moment, her hand slipped from her lap, landing on the floor between us, fingers trembling from the weight of everything she'd admitted. My hand moved toward it before I could stop myself, stopping just an inch away. She opened her eyes, looked at our hands, at me, back at our hands. Then, slowly, deliberately, she let her pinky brush mine. A small, almost invisible gesture. But I felt the full collapse of something inside her. The moment she stopped running, the moment she allowed us to exist without explanation. We can decide tomorrow, she said quietly. Okay. Not tonight, she added. Tonight, just let this be enough. And so we sat there on the worn shop floor. Nothing dramatic, nothing rushed. Just two people breathing in the same rhythm, sharing the same silence, letting something bruised but alive finally settle between them. When she finally whispered, "Don't move," it wasn't a command. It was a plea and a promise. People often imagine that love arrives with fireworks, revelations, or a single life-altering moment. But looking back now, I know ours didn't. It came quietly, almost shyly, in the pauses between conversations, in the small ways we learned each other. And maybe that's why I remember that evening so clearly, because it wasn't dramatic, and yet it changed everything. When I think about her now, I don't remember the tension or the uncertainty first. I remember the softness that followed. The air felt different afterward, like the world finally exhaled after holding its breath for too long. We didn't label anything, didn't rush to define what we were becoming. Instead, we let time stretch itself around us, warm and unhurried. In the weeks that followed, I noticed changes in both of us, subtle but unmistakable. He, because I can only speak as the person I was then, became more open, more willing to sit with his own feelings instead of trying to outlogic them. She became quieter in a way that felt deeper, as if she wasn't guarding her heart anymore, but simply resting it. We met halfway, without ever announcing we were doing it. Maybe that's the real beauty of what happened. Nothing was forced. It didn't feel like we fell in love in the cliché sense. It felt more like we grew toward each other, slowly, like two seeds planted in the same soil. And eventually, without either of us noticing, the roots intertwined. There's something grounding about that kind of love. It doesn't demand attention. It doesn't need to be performed. It's the kind that shows itself in the tiniest gestures. How she'd tilt her head when she was listening closely. How he'd stop talking the second he sensed her wanting to speak. How our conversations went from guarded explanations to comfortable silences that didn't require filling. That's what changed the most. How safe it felt simply to be. Before, I thought love was supposed to elevate you, lift you into something unreal. But what I learned is that real love settles you. Makes you feel like you finally found the right height, the right temperature, the right pace. I'm not saying everything became perfect. Life didn't magically smooth itself for us. But from that point on, even the hard moments felt different, less like battles and more like things we worked through side by side. And that quiet understanding, that unspoken willingness to stay, became the heartbeat of everything that followed. When I look back now, with more clarity than I had then, I think the most important lesson was this. Love doesn't need noise to be profound. Sometimes the quietest connections are the ones that last, the ones you carry with you long after the first spark has faded into something steadier, something human, something earned. And if you're still listening to this story now, maybe it's because a part of you recognizes that kind of love or hopes for it. If this story made you feel something, let me know in the comments. Would you want more stories like this?